Right, you might recognise the box in the background. That's last week's puzzle book, just drying there. So whilst that's drying, I'm moving on to the next thing. Now I'm going to more of a traditional scroll sawing type project by doing a puzzle. Now this is a chrysanthemum sort of design with kind of the fractal nature of the petals coming out. Took a long time to actually get this design worked out, but never mind. So it's very, very rough, and being a puzzle, I'm not going to make it insanely stupid by having a single petal as a piece. So these are kind of colour coded for blocks, so that there'll be blocks of 3 or 4 petals, or 2 or 3 petals together, rather than being a single petal. So I need to make a kind of black and white version of this. So I'm just putting it onto my light box with some plain copier paper. Just so you can see, and this is used paper before. It's got old recipes on the back. I always recycle what I can and get both sides used, so don't worry about any words you might be able to see coming through the image. So this is obviously bigger than an A4 sheet, so I'm going to do half and half, so that way it should hopefully line up. I'm just taping in the bottom corner so things don't shift around. Like that. Okay. And there's a temptation to use a nice big marker pen, but I want to do some fairly close, not detailed, but close pyro work, so I want to start with a thin pen. And as I go around each of these sections where they're connected, oh, that's a great line, wonky line to start with, where they're connected together as a piece. So, this is quite old-fashioned stuff. You can still get it in craft shops and things. And this stuff is hand-me-down to start with. I'm not quite sure how well that's going to come out, but we shall see. So I'm going to start this corner here. So if you've got a stylus, then use that. If not, pencil works just as well. So when I put my scroll saw away in November, I said I'd make a new pad to go underneath it, and I spent some time designing quite a complicated device with different levels of padding and different levels of complexity. And then just now when I was tidying up my shed, I found a piece of quite high density foam, and I thought that'll do. So I've just cut the contour of the machine and used the offcut here to lengthen the back, so I'm covering the whole length of it, and I'm just taking out a couple of notches where the screws go through just to secure it to the table. So all that work, minimal fuss. Hold off on putting the spiral on. I'm using a straight number 2 to begin with, because I'm just doing a long curve, so that should be easy. Just put this on and see what happens. That's actually a lot better than it used to be. Having that extra bit of padding here certainly helps. That was a good idea of mine. So I've got here 3 layers of ply with, or 4 layers with the thin ply on the top with the image on, and I've put a couple of pins in most of the way through just to hold the centre down, because I've only taped around the top. So first things first, I'm going to cut round this border just to make sure that's not going to jam anything. Actually, I'm going to cut down first, I think. Clean this up before. And this is cutting so smoothly. I'm pleasantly surprised. A bit more light on the picture. Okay, so now I'm going to start going around this outer edge Might get a little bit dicey because this is quite flappy, but go in small stages. Okay, so if you can hear something in the background, that's the rain hitting the roof. The weather's turned very spring-like. So these are sat overnight and they are pretty much dry. It's probably a little cold down here last night, but they should be alright. Okay, so that's all my pieces cut. I was trying to get to the very middle of the pattern quite quickly because I didn't want to be trying to fiddle about with the very small pieces when I only had a little bit of wood to do. So I kind of worked my way in and then did the small bits first and then came out again. So that worked quite well. So, and this cut really quite cleanly. I think a 4-month gap is probably too long between score saw projects, so I was a little rusty, but I got better as I went along, which is a good thing. So I'm just going to give these a quick whiz over on my sanding strip, because the bottom veneer or bottom ply where I didn't wrap the whole thing in tape, it's gone a little bit furry, but that's not really a problem. So I'm just going to give these a quick whiz over and then move on to the next stage. So that's all the tape gone. I've left the tape on this bottom ring here because I'm going to paint the inside and I don't want that to come out on the top. So my pyrography tool is heating up. Is at heat. And see here, it's not burning very quickly. So it's going to make it slightly difficult to work with, but it should be okay. So I'm going to start by working around the leaves. So if I take out one of the single ones, I'm not too concerned about the carbon lines I've got on here, because I'm burning these very dark. So in particular around, where are you going to see this? So this is the bottom edge here, so I'm going to shade this down quite considerably. And that's going to take out most of the carbon anyway, so that's not a problem. So I'm giving that a really dark line along the bottom edge here. Now I've also added a couple of dragonflies on here. That's basically where I tipped over the tool too far and I managed to graze it with the kind of ring on the bottom here. You can kind of sand it all back to get rid of that, but that would leave a fairly hefty dent because it does go through quite a few layers, even if you only touch it lightly. So turn my mistakes into dragonflies. Not a problem. Adds a bit of something to it. So just coming down with some white spirit. I'm not adding a lot of colour, just going to build it up slowly. I've got a really long brush, so just starting with pure yellow, quite a bit of water. We'll start with the very outside edge. Done my first round of painting. Looks quite quite bright. I'm going to wait for this to dry and then sand it back just a touch, so you just end up with what's stained the wood rather than the actual fill of paint. And I'm going to add some highlights with gold and white. And whilst I'm waiting for that, I'm going to start painting the sides of my pieces. Now the pieces are just bare ply at the minute, so what I'm going to do is just give them a coat of black just to cover the ply here, and that should match in with what I'm going to do with this surface when I get round to that. So, put a tray. It's mostly clean, so I'm just going to go through one at a time and just paint around the edges, and then I'm going to work on the inside of the puzzle itself. So I'll come back to you for the next bit. Or no, delete this recording, I'll do all the painting and then come back. Right, so into my pyrography tool I've put a stamping kind of tip. And depending on what kind of tool you get, you may just have kind of drawing tips rather than stamps, but this one comes with 5 or 6 of these. At some point I'll do a 3-minute skill on pyro, so I'm just going to test it out on a bit of scrap here, so it's kind of a lines or hatch design. So simple enough. I'm just going to work my way round, just pressing down and turning slightly so that I'm filling in at different angles. Pressing quite hard because I want a decent level of burn here. So that comes out very well. See, I'm just filling in like that. Okay, so with the edge coloured, that's come out rather nice. But what I want to do is get rid of some of the strength of this paint. It's a bit too bold, I think. So I'm just going to go over it very gently with some sandpaper, just to kind of take off the very top layer, so the bit that's kind of stained into the wood is more visible, and also the pyro is going to come out a bit more. And having painted around the sides here, this is quite a bit tighter in the fit, which is a good thing. But I'm still going to go around it with a file just to tidy that up later on. So I'm going along the line of the grain here, just very lightly. Okay. That's taken off kind of the very bold bits of colour. Still got a fair bit of colour on it, but it's at least taken it back slightly, so that I can add some kind of highlights and just put some extra life into this paint. So what I'm going to do on the outside edges of the petals, I'm going to do a little bit of white, particularly on those that lift out, so I'm actually getting the edges, the outer edges, and then I'm going to put a little bit of gold across the middle for some highlight and some gold on the leaves. So okay, so you can see I've finished the highlighting, and I've added less and less white as I've got to the centre, so there's just a little bit kind of mostly brushed off in the middle bits, so the colour's still fairly vibrant but not as glowing as it was. So now I'm going to move on to a little bit of gold. I'm going to be very sparing with this. I don't want them to be glowing gold, I just want a touch of a highlight. So, using my long thin brush and keeping it quite dry, so not adding any water to it, so it's just a little bit of gold just on the very end of the brush. And I'm going to leave them in as I do this. I think it's slightly easier and more stable, so I'm just going to go from about the middle here and just brush up and out. Not sure how well that's going to come out on camera. That one there, it doesn't come out at all. Okay, but believe me, there's a little bit of a glimmer just in that bottom edge. And so that is about finished. So I'm going to add some feelers or whatever they're called at the front of my dragonfly, just to make it more dragonfly-like. I'll just use a thin pen or a pencil for that, and then give this a coat of spray varnish. At the minute it's too windy and changeable out there for that kind of business, so that's going to have to wait. But I'm calling this my first Scroll Saw project of 2017 finished as far as possible. Be with you next week for the Sugarcraft Guild demo, which is quite interesting. So see you next week.